Hey there, everyone. Let me know if you're in the chat today. I'm going to go wrong. I want to move. Keith's here. What's up, Keith? I got your message that about your Cinema 4D, which is awesome. You're up and running, which sounds great. It is. They make it like such a, how do we say, like an annoying process kind of to get through it. Lena's here. What's up, Audrey? Audrey, you're Chibi Dark Lord, correct? How was your guys' weekend? I don't know if anyone's into PC gaming, but I downloaded Baldur's Gate 3. Has anyone played that? Have anyone into like top-down RPG games? Just start the stream off chill today. Let's talk a little video games for a second. I personally thought it was awesome. I haven't played a top-down RPG since like one of the first two Diablo games. And I mean, I was a kid then. What's up, Nakara? How you doing today? But this game is sweet. Did you like it, Keith? Did you like the beta? The customization is hilarious, but the game itself is really awesome. I think I have to, because it's such a dense game, I need time to kind of understand all of my spells because I'm playing as a druid class, but and there's just a lot to like see right off the bat because I'm used to playing like action adventure games are kind of more my jam. So like I'm a super big fan of the Uncharted series. I'm a massive fan of the Last of Us series. What else? God of War. Like I just thought God of War was amazing. So I'm like I do like a lot of independent games too, but just in general, those are kind of the games you'll catch me playing. If anything, was playing Jedi Survivor for a while, those kind of games. Yeah. So I have a bad habit of trying to get the best results. Yeah, it's playing a role playing. So I actually, fun fact about me, I recently got into playing like actual D&D this year. And I play with my neighbor like all the time. We played a bunch of different tabletop role playing games, and oh my gosh, like that! If you're a creative person, those games are just so much fun because there's, as long as your DM allows or your GM allows like you to do kind of whatever in the games, you can think of some crazy stuff, and I absolutely love playing those games. I really wish that I would have kind of learned how to play them when I was younger in high school, or even in college when I was in college at first, because it's going to be something I play for the rest of my life. Just one second. All right. I want to try playing it, but it's a lot to learn. Yeah, I mean, that's why thankfully, like, there's a bunch of guides online that uh, kind of walk you through, like, what you need to know in the very beginning, because that's kind of what intimidated me at first about it, was the fact that it's like, first of all, finding out that it was an RPG that's darn near close to the Dungeons and Dragons manual, the 5th edition. And so like I already know that it's like there's so much I'm learning constantly. Like there's never a time when I play where I'm not like learning a bunch of stuff, and the video game is very much close to that. And so I already knew it would be a lot, but you can play with people online, but you can also play by yourself, and I feel like playing by yourself gives you the opportunity to learn a little bit more. And it's coming, I think, to PlayStation 5, and I don't know about Xbox One, but PlayStation 5, it should be coming too soon. So definitely a good game. Worth watching some people play online, I guess, if you're gonna invest in it, because it's pricey. There's no way to get around that. I'm so sorry, class. Just one second. All right. So let's kind of get into class right now. I know I sidetracked for a second. I just wanted to talk to you guys about that. I know most of my students are gamers, and I like playing games, so something we bond over, right? Playing games. I'll always play games. I'll be like 80 years old inside of a home yelling at the nurses to get away because they're in front of my television and I'm trying to see. That will be me 1,000%. Okay, so let me bring this over here. You guys did a really good job on the technology login challenge. I think there were a couple people who might have had a little bit more. I think like I said, the most difficult part was the Cinema 4D. And there's only a couple people where I'm questioning whether they got the trial or if they actually ended up with the student version. So just check that. I do write things inside of your grade. When I'm grading, I leave you guys comments on your work, so you guys can respond in there, or you can send me an email through Canvas if you'd like to, or a message in Slack. Any one of those will work, and I can always answer questions there. But I just want to make sure that you guys are actually working with the full-fledged version and not the trial version, because that will obviously expire in like a week or two, and class lasts longer than that. So we just want to make sure. A lot of people did a really good job getting in your participation grades. We're going to start off class going through those participation grades, and then we're going to start talking about your first assignment. It's labeled the 3 bouncing balls, and we'll kind of go through that and start that off. I am going to be going over the first part today and then the next part on Thursday. So it's going to be a 2-part class. A lot of our classes are going to be like that, where I am, I'll go over your participation grades first, and then we'll jump into the lecture, and then jump into the project at the same time. Lecture, project are one and the same, right? And then we're going to continue that for the next class, and usually then that weekend after is when the assignment is due. Right here, I have the assignment due on the 5th of September, which is next Tuesday. Actually, I need you guys to have that in. That was the wrong date. Let's see. Let me edit that real quick. September 4th is when I need it, which would be because I go over your guys' stuff in class usually, or let me get out of this view real quick. Just 1 second. Let me know any questions that you guys have right now too in the chat, if you have any. We want to do Monday. Okay, that is correct. Let me save that information. There we go. Okay, it is going to be due the 4th. Due Monday the 4th, but it is open and available until September 11th, which is a week after the project is due. After that, you no longer receive, you're no longer are eligible to receive 100% of the grade. And I'll be deducting points uh, kind of drastically after that. And that's the whole thing, to keep you guys on track and keep you guys um, focused on getting that work done, because like I said, this class moves quickly and there's a lot of information. And so we want to get through it. I don't want you guys getting behind. So this is when I want it due. I want it in by this day. But you have until this time to submit it. I know things happen. People um, have jobs, like I said, families, stuff like that. So we'll go over this here in a second, but let me go back here. I do have a question from Keith in the chat. How we would submit these assignments, because I don't see any modules open today. Well, I just opened this one. I usually wait to open the module until we have, like, right before class is starting. So this one will be your module for your project, and I'll go through that here in a minute. But let's start off with these participation grades. This one's obviously due for next week, so you don't have to do it right away, but just having it done by then. And we are going to start here with Carmen. I don't know if I think Giselle is your first name, actually. Please excuse me, guys. I haven't heard all of your names yet. Only everyone who's been in the chat, really. So we are going to learn them today. Hopefully you guys introduce yourself.
Hello everyone. So for today's participation assignment, I have a question about the technology sign-in challenge. Regarding Miro. So when signing in to Miro, it required me to assign myself in a team, and I didn't know if there was a particular team to join or if it didn't matter at all. But aside from that, I would say that the assignment was easy to understand, and I was able to complete it without any complications. Thank you.
Yeah, nope, you did it right. There's really no teams, so you don't have to worry about it. It's more geared towards um like working together in groups, like for like companies and stuff like that. And so you don't have to worry about it. You did it correctly, and then you'll be able to just add. I've given you guys the link to the new mural board. In fact, let me update the. I think I have to update the homepage because you guys are already in there. So let me do that real quick while I've got you guys here and I'm remembering it. Sometimes there's so much on my plate that I forget stuff, and I try not to. Uh, let's change the home page. This one. I believe this is it. Let me go back and check. You guys are probably seeing this. Yeah, perfect. Awesome. Okay, so now I have changed the home page for you guys, and it looks like this. And on that homepage, you guys can click on this link, which is to the mural board that I sent you guys in the chat last week. But now everyone's going to easily have access to that. You just click on this, and it will take you to the mural board where I've created all of the notes and stuff for you guys. And from there, you guys can access like any of the links that I put in. The other one is for you guys personal. So if you guys want to take personal notes or anything like that, I just wanted you guys to have that option there to do so. And so then we have the principles of motion design, which we will go over today. And just kind of a little gift for you guys to look at, and a little explanation about just the participation grades. But you guys are pretty privy to that right now. So, all right, good question. Starting off, let's go to Jade.
Hello, my name is Jade, and like what you see, is French. I don't know why it turned into French. So, how do you translate this website to English?
Hmm. That is interesting. Fun fact, I let my mother in law borrow our car once and she turned the language to French. And we have no idea how. And that was a nightmare. So let's kind of try and figure that out real quick if we can. Just go to Miro. Mm-hmm. I'm going to assume it's going to be somewhere in your settings. That is so crazy that it's set to French. Preferences, profile settings. Let me just make sure I'm not going to get... Okay. Jade, let me look that up for you. For a second, I was like, oh, you speak French. That's when I saw that, and no, that's the problem. Comment, no, that's me. Let me see if I can search on here. Oh, okay, yeah, no, okay. So under, this is how you get to it. You go to, you click on the little hamburger menu. That is called a hamburger menu, by the way. I guess because of the layers, but whatever. And then you go to preferences and then profile settings. And when you click that, I just want to make sure none of my personal information was on there. But when you click that, you go to language, and then from French to English. So no more Francois for you. Now you can see everything the way it should be. So that should work for you. All right, let's go to the next question. We have Audrey in the chat. Sweet.
Okay. Hi, my name's Audrey.
What's up, Audrey?
I'm kind of nervous, but
It is weird being on camera. I will not lie. It takes a minute.
to be honest, I kind of still do not know my questions, but I'm still thinking about them. But I think the one thing is that I'm still just trying to figure out how to get my Maxon thing, my Maxon license, and then I think the one thing that I'm kind of curious about and really excited about is like the 2D animation and how that's going to work. If we're mostly going to be using After Effects or the other apps, or if we can be using like all of them. Artistic. Okay. I'm also kind of worried that I won't have enough space on my computer for all this animation like programs. So if I have to get like a new CPU or like get more storage on here, then for this week's work, we're just gonna be working on the ball animation.
Okay, let me answer those questions kind of in like while you're asking them, right? So like your as far as your space on your computer, that's why I recommend getting the external hard drive so that you have somewhere to store all of your stuff when you're saving it. For this class, there's not a the projects aren't necessarily going to be super large. If I go to last granted I don't have a bunch of stuff rendered, but if I go to last classes one, this is only about 5 gigs worth, probably a little more than this. Granted, I don't have all of the renders and a bunch of PNGs and stuff. You guys probably get closer to 7 gigs, maybe 8 gigs that you'll need for project stuff. But that's why I'm telling you guys to get an external hard drive so that you can just kind of store all of your projects on there, right? Like, and that's why I taught you guys the saving process the way you can, and keeping this organized. So if you move a project from your hard drive to your desktop to work directly on the computer, and then back to your hard drive to save it, right? You'll be able to easily do that back and forth. But if you don't want to do the hard drive, the external hard drive, and you just want to work on your computer, I would just recommend having about 10 gigs of space minimum for this class. And then you also have to remember that the computer takes up some of that. It uses some of that stuff to run these programs, but you should be okay. If you start running into issues, then you should let me know. But yeah, I understand that. Like my computer right now, like my laptop, I've got probably maybe 30 gigs of space left on it. But I usually work off of my hard drive. And it's okay to, I mean, it's not ideal to do that, but if you are doing that, it's not that big of a deal. Because Keith mentioned that that's a concern for him as well.
Mostly on that, and then mostly on that week.
Also, by the way, the 2D animations, yes, we're mostly going to be working in After Effects.
And then
in
we're
Cinema
working
4D.
on more technical stuff, right? If I'm still a bit like trying to understand all the process information about all this stuff, because it's a lot of information. So I'm just gonna have to go back through the VODs and go through them.
Yeah, and you guys will learn things as you start working in it. That's the biggest thing I want you guys to take away from this is it's going to kind of just take you getting into the process.
That's all I have for now, but I'll probably, as the weeks and as the months go on, when we end this semester, then there'll probably be a lot more questions and a lot more things I'll ask.
Yeah,
but
there will be. It's okay. You did great for right now.
I think that's all.
Yeah, great job, Audrey. Great job. That was perfect. But yeah, you guys will, as you guys go and you start working in it, you're going to start to understand things a lot more. Last week was just an introduction to it, and we're going to start actually working in it and start your projects this week. All right.
Hello, my name is Elizabeth Hubbard. My major is animation and time-based media, and I am super excited for this class.
Awesome. Sweet.
Besides that, something that was difficult
You're
or
welcome,
unclear
Audrey.
during this week's work was during the technology login challenge. We were supposed to create a large JPG on Miro. However, for some reason, even when using my student account, I could not create one. So I had to make a PDF on Adobe Acrobat. Something that went well for this week was my hard drives.
Nice.
I was able to get 2 of them, one of them being a 500 gigabyte and the other being a 1 terabyte.
Nice.
So I have a lot of storage to work with.
You do.
One last thing that was difficult during this week's work was creating a Max 1 account.
Yeah.
There was a lot of steps, and I definitely had to take my time. Other than that, that's about it. Thank you, and have a good day.
Awesome, Elizabeth. Thank you so much. That was great. And yeah, I'm happy that you mentioned that, because I realized that through, I think Lena mentioned it to me, that there was no option to export a high quality JPEG. And so that's why I gave you guys the option to do a PDF instead. And the PDFs seem to work much better for you guys, because I noticed a majority of you submitted that. And so, as I'm like kind of fine tuning and tweaking this class, I'm taking what I'm seeing is difficult for you guys as far as tech wise goes, and just kind of adjusting the process to what seems to be better. So I appreciate you guys telling me that. And so now, it was totally fine for you guys to just export it as a PDF. Later on, I'll try and catch, because I think that we do that a couple times where we are turning in PDFs or images, and if it says to do it in Miro and I space on like changing that, or I don't see it in the module and for some reason haven't changed it, it is okay to turn in a PDF. That is completely fine. It works a little bit better that way, and I'm able to like actually see if you guys are actually like logged in and signed up for certain programs as well. All right, Nakara.
Hello, my name is Nakara, and I have two questions for you. My first question is, in your opinion, what is the best program to use to animate? And my last question is, in this class, what program do we use the most to animate?
Okay.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Nakara, are you still in the chat? I would say that the best program, let me say this. Okay, industry standard program is After Effects and the Adobe Suite. That's what a lot of the industry uses. As far as like 2D goes and special effects go, that's what the industry standard is. As far as 3D programs, the industry standard right now is Cinema 4D with Maxon. Also, like ZBrush, which is also under the Maxon umbrella, right? And then aside from any Maxon software, the other one is Autodesk. Autodesk is has more programs that are geared towards like art, animation, and like architectural builds, kind of. Cinema 4D, they can all do that, right? They all are the same programs, just a different interface. But I am just used to animating in Adobe After Effects and I'm comfortable in it. That's why. There's really no competitive program that works with 2D other than like Animate and After Effects and but I'm not going to be surprised if they're in the future, and I hope there is like a competing kind of program that does that. If I'm telling you guys the truth, I love the animation, like hand drawn animation options inside of Procreate instead of using Adobe Animate. I'll teach you guys how to do Adobe Animate this week, but and that's for hand drawn animation. But for me personally, I love Procreate for that. And the reason is you get really great brush options. It's really smooth. I like having the fact that you can obviously draw it on a tablet versus like Adobe Animate doesn't work with a tablet. There is no app for a tablet use. You can use it. There are like some workarounds with that. And if you have a Wacom tablet, you can obviously use that, and it's just connected to your computer. So it's like essentially an extended monitor, which, by the way, I'll mention again, you guys can rent from the school. So if you guys want to, you can do that. Pardon me, hold on. But as far as hand drawn animation, like there's some really cool stuff you can do in Procreate, and I really enjoy that. Plus, Procreate offers the ability to kind of paint textures onto 3D objects in a way that I haven't worked with before, and I think it's very intuitive and it's really nice, and that's why I really like using that. But we, like I said, we don't do a lot of hand drawn animation in this class. We work more with 2D animation inside of After Effects and 3D animation inside of Cinema 4D, and those are the two programs that we're going to use the most. But good question. Lena, there's no link for where you can rent the Wacom tablets, but you'll just the same place where you rent the computers from school, you can rent the Wacom tablets. So just the technology building, they should be able to get those for you. But I have Josh next.
Hi, Miss Makara. I'm Joshua Llewellyn. This might be a dumb question, but I was kind of just curious about Moxon. So, kind of like for how Adobe Creative Cloud, we get it for free for being with the school.
Yep.
Do we also get Moxon for free, or do we actually have to pay the $10?
Yeah, so the $10 gets you 6 months of Maxon Cinema 4D, but it is a student license, right? So it's significantly less money than if you were to pay out of pocket for the full-fledged non-student licensing version of it. And they used to offer it for free, and unfortunately they don't do that anymore. I think we might start is eventually integrating more Blender, right? Because Blender is also a 3D program that is becoming more prevalent in the 3D animation space, and it's becoming a much more robust program that people can work in, which is awesome because it's free to use. But for this class, since we work with industry standard programs, we teach you Cinema 4D. And so paying the $10 is just part of it. It's like, since we don't have a book, really, that's like buying your book, right? So yes, we unfortunately have to pay for that. And as far as we're lucky though that after like the Adobe suite doesn't require us to pay anything, and that lasts as long as you guys are in school. So you guys can continuously use that throughout the rest of like your schooling time here. And then unfortunately every 6 months, if you're in another 3D class or another animation class where we work with 3D stuff, then you will have to renew it. But I just look at it as like buying a cheap book, right? That's kind of all it is. So good question there. All right, we have, I think,
Hi,
Natalie.
my name's Natalie, and
What's
I
up,
just had
Natalie?
a couple questions for this week. The first one was, which software are we going to be using frequently?
After
I just
Effects
wanted to
Cinema
get
4D.
a head start on that since I struggle a little to learn new software.
That's okay.
And the other question was, is the animation industry as competitive as people say?
Yes.
I've had some friends who tried, but they didn't know a lot of connections, so they struggled a bit, even though their portfolio was really good. But yeah, that's all the questions I had for this week.
Yeah, it's
Didn't
competitive. I will say that.
struggle. I downloaded all the software, learned it well enough, and just yeah, that's everything. Thank you.
That's okay, Natalie. And then if you struggle a little more in the software, like I said, Slack me, send me emails, or utilize Bell. Like Bell, I think is logged on to, like Bell was here until 4:30. Her hours are here, so I definitely recommend using Bell if possible. Um, she's a tutor. I'm sorry. Let me go to our class right here. Yes, she's the tutor for our class, so if you need help, she's there to help as well. Um, as far as like the animation industry goes, so I work in like marketing and advertising, and that industry is a lot less competitive because there's a need more for those people on a smaller scale level, right? Like at a statewide level, at like small businesses need advertising, marketing. There's a lot wider of a net that you can cast for jobs. And so if you want the like stability and having like a full-time job, I would say, in my opinion, marketing and advertising is the way to go with that. Not saying that you can't do really cool projects with that. Some people do really well and work for really large, like do work for large companies like McDonald's, Adidas, all these major brands, because they don't always just need commercials, right? Sometimes they need stuff for other countries, other locations, maybe for training, for like intercompany videos that they need, right? So there's that option. Then there's the option of like the entertainment industry. And unfortunately, the entertainment industry has kind of turned in on the artist just like it has as far as the acting kind of goes. They have stopped really hiring people full time as animators, and now they do things as like a contractual based um jobs, and they do this in the gaming industry as well, which is unfortunate because I think that kind of, it just makes it more competitive for people who are trying to get that next job, right? you know, if you do a really good job and you're working with the same person in the same department at a studio or something, they might like rehire you again. But what if that person leaves, you know, and then they bring in someone else who has other contacts that they want to use, and then you're no longer on the list of people that they use, right? So it can be more competitive, and it's just a little bit more complex because you're working as a contractor, which means you have to do everything from your own taxes to your own business overhead to like all of that kind of stuff. So you have to kind of know a little bit more about business. You can hire people to do that as well, but in the beginning you end up doing a lot of that kind of stuff yourself. Lena asked, in marketing and advertising, do you know if they require you to have a certain degree or they just look at your reels? I think it kind of depends on where you end up working. Some people just want to see the work that you have, and some people on their job descriptions require like a bachelor's degree and a certain amount of time in the field, right? And so I recommend to people going on to places like LinkedIn and any kind of job posting, like job board posting websites, and looking at the jobs that you want and seeing what kind of things they require and start working towards those type of projects that you want to start getting. And that way you're kind of working yourself into a niche, which is kind of the best. I wish that advice was kind of given to me early on in my career, because um, sometimes you get stuck. And it's not saying that you can't do contract work for marketing and advertising as well. You're going to get hired on full time and have like benefits and stuff more likely in the marketing and advertising field, because you can work at that point for marketing agencies, production studios, types of things like that. But um, but if you're wanting to do like entertainment and stuff like that, you should start like focusing your work onto specific things that you want and looking to see where those contracts are and what they're requiring and what they want to see out of your work. Honestly, have I ever been asked to show my degree? No, but they do like to see a degree, and degrees can affect your pay scale when they're looking at, um, setting you up for pay. So that's kind of just my recommendation, or just information to give you guys to kind of soak into your head, right? All right, so we have Christian next.
Hello. So, my main question this week is,
I'm sorry, Tristan.
Are we going to be using OPS only for the Q&A videos, or are we also gonna be using it for like other stuff in the class?
I first of all said your name incorrectly. It is Tristan and not Christian, so I apologize about that, Tristan. But yeah, OBS is just going to be used for your questions for this class, because you're able to record your screen and export a video and then, just send it to me. I think there's some other screen recording like stuff you guys can use, but I just prefer to use OBS. That's what I'm comfortable in. So and it's open source and free. So that's what I give you guys to use. Melissa.
This week, a thing that I found that wasn't clear was the technology challenge Cinema 4D. It had a very confusing interface after you purchased it, and it took a while on how to actually download the app.
Yeah, it's not the easiest one. That I say is the most confusing. But once if you guys haven't gotten the Cinema 4D, if you guys haven't gotten it installed and ready to go, write me right away inside of Slack or in Canvas, because I need to know that so that we can work through the issue and try and figure it out for you, because you guys are going to use it this week. All right, Jesus? Oh, I can't hear it. Let me see.
If we're going to be making 3D animations, because within one of the modules.
Here, let me rewind this.
But I don't have my camera currently. I'll be getting it soon. One question I did have for this class and the ongoing semester was if we're going to be making
Yep, Jesus, we definitely will be making animations inside of Cinema 40. So you guys are going to learn how to do 3D animation, not like character stuff really. You guys will create like an Eve from Wall-E. I'm sure you guys have all seen the movie Wall-E. We're going to kind of create an Eve robot later on in the semester, which is the really only character that we create in this semester. But that's because we're kind of just introducing you guys into modeling, introducing you guys into the program, and that is kind of stuff that you learn later on in a more higher level class with animation once you guys have gone through this introductory course. But good question there. I'm gonna try and see. I'm probably gonna have to turn this down real quick because I had to turn it up quite a bit. Next time, Jose, I want you to check your, or I'm sorry, Jesus, I want you to check your audio levels so that you can be a little louder because I had to crank up everything just now. So let me know if you have trouble with that next time. And we have Keith.
Hello, my name is Keith, and I was
What's up,
wondering,
Keith?
I think you mentioned that we won't be touching Blender, but I just like to make sure. On the syllabus, it says that we should have the software for Blender. Also, another one of my questions is, will we be rigging or doing any like creating our own assets, or are we using kind of like a pre-made assets for the projects that we work on for this class? I think that's the only questions I have at the moment.
Yeah, so good questions. With Blender, we're not using it in this class right now. You might use it in a different class. But if you guys want to mess around in Blender at the same time, like I said, the concept and the ideas of what are in Blender are very similar to Cinema 40, but it's just a different like user interface or interface layout, and so you'll just have to figure out kind of where everything is within there and look up shortcuts and stuff on your own. But in this class we learn inside of Cinema 40. And as far as the rigging and stuff like that, you'll learn basic rigging inside of Cinema 4D and After Effects, and you will also learn kind of basic modeling, but we will use preloaded assets. In fact, we will use an asset folder that is like, there's like an asset library that's included with Cinema 4D. We use that. And then there are some pre-made, how do we say it? Like there's templates. Sorry, lost the word for a second. But there's templates inside of the modules that I'll give you. In fact, there's one for this week. And I give you those templates and it's already got everything kind of set up for you guys in there. But when we get further into the classes, when we start doing like our own modeling and our own rigging, you guys learn what rigging is and kind of how to do it. And but further in down the way for other classes, if you want to do more 3D stuff, Dr. Casey Farina teaches a lot more of that, and that's where you'll learn how to do like texture meshes and all more in-depth stuff with 3D. So good question though. And we have Brian.
Hello, Ms. Makara. My name is Brian Salgado. Just completing this assignment for the participation grade, and even though I don't have any questions right now regarding any of the previous week's assignments for the first week of school, just because everything was pretty straightforward and clear, did just want to say that learning everything did go pretty well. It was pretty intuitive to just get everything started. I'm anticipating that this might change once we actually start getting into the actual work required for the class. But right now, everything was pretty straightforward, just setting everything up. I don't have any questions right now, but yeah, like I said, so far, just setting everything up was pretty easy.
Cool. Excellent. Awesome, Brian. Yeah, and that will change. You will have questions as you go further down the road. All right, and we have Lena.
Hi, I'm Lena, and I have an industry question.
Awesome.
In the industry, are Adobe products the most used, or are there other softwares besides Adobe that are commonly used? I also have an OBS question. I know you mentioned you wanted us to film this in MP4, but when I go to the settings, under output, under the recording format, there was 2 options for MP4. There was the MPEG-4, which I chose, and there was also another version in the drop down which was called fragmented MP4.
You don't want it
So I was just
fragmented.
wondering
You picked the
which
correct
one
one.
to choose.
Yeah, you picked the correct one. If not, it
Thank
auto yeah, well, thank you. That was so nice. The MP4, your setting that you have is perfect. Sometimes OBS will output things as an MKV file, which is also acceptable. I'm not going to say you guys can't turn that in either. The only one I don't want turned in is an MOV file. And the reason being is because that's formatted for Macs and it doesn't play natively on PCs. And so then I have to bring it into a program and then play it versus there, which is a lot more of an issue. So just don't, I don't even know if it gives you the option to export it as an MOV, but just don't do that. MP4, MKV, those are great. So you did that correctly. And then I inadvertently answered your question earlier that yes, After Effects and the Adobe Suite is industry standard. After Effects is industry standard for effects, right? More or less like that. And then a lot of people in the marketing and advertising world, we all work inside of After Effects to do 2D animation. Adobe Animate is one of the ones that they use for 2D animation. I'm sure that there are several other hand-drawn animation programs that are also very popular. I know Toon Boom was very popular, and I'm not sure because I don't do hand-drawn animation for my job, and so I'm not quite sure all of the programs that a lot of people work in, but there's more hand-drawn animation programs to work in than there are just kind of the 2D stuff that we're going to be doing in class. And so there's several different programs, but really the gist of animation, what you guys are learning in this class, can be applied to any software that you're working in, right? There's always going to be if you're doing just a 2D animation where it's like automated, like in After Effects, right? You're always going to have keyframes and different things to work in. If you're doing hand-drawn animation, you're always going to be working with frames, different frames that you're drawing on and backgrounds and stuff like that. So the concepts are all there. And if you understand your principles of animation, what we're going to talk about soon here, then you can apply all of this stuff to your animation. It's just the learning curve of the layout of that software that you're working in. Usually, and it takes, a little while for you guys to get comfortable and quick in those programs, but if you're working on it in that program every day, you're going to learn a lot quicker than if you were just opening it up every once in a while and dusting it off, right? So, good questions, Elena. All right, finally, Jasmine.
Hello, I'm Jasmine. I have 2 questions.
What's up, Jasmine?
My first question is on my workspace. I want to know how can I move this part all the way across the screen, and then this part just put it on top of it. I've been trying messing with it, but haven't had any luck. I know you can move it to the middle, to the right, to the left, but not where I want it.
Okay.
Any help with that? And then my second question.
Let's address that really quickly for you. Is that really loud? That's really loud for me, just that video. Is that okay for you guys in the chat? I just want to make sure I'm not... I turned it down, I believe, in the chat, but I just want to make sure you guys aren't hearing it really loudly. Let me see here. I'm going to open this After Effects so I can show you how to do that. So adjusting your panels is awesome. I'm happy that you're playing around with that, Jasmine, because that's something that you, at some point, you're going to have a certain workflow that you like to, that is more efficient for you, right? Everyone has a different workflow. Okay, sounds good to you guys. All right, awesome chat. Thank you. Everyone has a different workflow, right? And so whatever works best for you, you can adjust things around. So and having the most space on your timeline is absolutely something that you guys want. Ooh, I deleted that GIF. See, that's what I'm saying. It's missing from the project, but I just deleted it off my desktop because I don't need it for here anymore, since it was just an example. What is this? Minimize that. Okay, that's fine. Let's remove that. So in order to get this panel, because you do want as much room available on your timeline to see, let me move my camera inside of here so you guys can see this real quick. There we go. What you do is you will notice that inside, let me get my zooming thing on, sorry. There we go, running that. When I hover over the top of a panel, you guys will see that there is, it makes it disappear. You guys can kind of see that there's like this little box that's next to the arrow, right? And that means that you're about to grab the entire panel. And then if you just are holding, clicking, and dragging down, if you drag it all the way to the bottom and you see this green line appear, drag and drop it there, and it will drop that panel across the whole screen. I can do that with any panel. Any panel is available for me to move around and to adjust. So if I wanted this one to have its own, I'm going to put that down there, and that one's got its own. But then I can drag this up, and so I have two things here. This is, you don't really use the paint panel. That's for more masking and rotoscoping stuff, which we don't do in this class because this we don't really work with this very often. I don't even really use it in my job that often, so it's not that prevalent for you guys right now. But let me see. Let me go to this panel right here. But yeah, let's say you wanted your libraries panel always accessible down here. You could do that. And then once you get this, when you're in between panels, this little icon shows up of the mouse. And that's where you can click and drag things. I'd say the most important ones that I'm always using are the effects panel. I'm always using the effects panel, which is effects and presets. I'm always using my project panel, my effects controls panel, and then there is a new panel, which is lovely. I love it. It's called the properties panel. In fact, I shall drag that over here because, in fact, I kind of want it in between these, so I'm going to put that there. And the properties panel allows you to change things within this panel versus having to drop it down manually here on your timeline, because you're going to have a lot of layers here at some point, and it just gets kind of, it's just not fun to have to unfurl a bunch of little menus inside of your layer versus just kind of click, like to do something like changing a color, right? Versus to just click on the layer and then changing things within here. Like you can change stroke color with any like cap changes on your text or on lines. And so this is new to After Effects since I think over the summer it started, and this is just awesome. So if I were you guys, I'd move your property panels to conserve screen space, because you guys are probably all working on laptops. I would move it into this area right here, where it's just, you just push this little dual arrow and you can just kind of tab between the panels there, or you can just click on them like this and get in between the three. But if you guys are working on someone that has the space, you can just move it right over to here and then you have it there. But this is good to have quick access to. And then these on the side. And let's say I want to save this layout now for next time I come into class. I'm just going to click this little hamburger menu next to the GCC layout up there. Let me move my camera real quick. I just want to make sure you guys are seeing that. And I'm going to click that and then save changes to this workspace so that whenever I close out of this and go back to it, it's saved on there. So yeah, that's how you do that. Let me answer the rest of your question.
Hello. You show us how to make this bird fly from one side of the screen to the other. The question has to do with the speed of the bird. I know in last class you showed us how to make this bird fly from one side of the screen to the other screen and do some spinning. That was cool. And also you show us like how we can make it to go faster and slower with the time frames.
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm trying to see is, what if I want my bird to start the first 5 frames to start really fast, and then the next 5 frames to slow down, like kind of like slow motion, and then the rest of it just to fly across the screen. And I'm assuming, like, I don't know, like I need to add another like gray dot
A
in
keyframe.
between these two, so I can let the program know, like, at this
Exactly.
time I want you to go slow and then the rest of it go fast. But if you can help me out, that would be great. And that's it. That's
Yeah.
all.
Awesome, Jasmine. You're thinking like higher level now. That's how I kind of want you guys to start shifting your thought, is to start getting curious about, what if I do this? What if I do this? And like experimenting a little more. It's going to take some time to like really develop that, but start coming into the mind frame of like, how do I problem solve this? Because that's going to be something that you guys are dealing with often in this industry, is problem solving, because there's new stuff coming out all the time. There's new techniques happening all the time, and you're going to have to figure things out for clients that are like, I want you to get this done. You're like, I've never done that, but okay, let's go for it, right? And you're just kind of, you just do a lot of research and try and figure out different techniques and what you can do together. And so there's like a big problem solving part to this industry, and you're always kind of trying to put the puzzle together on what works best. So you'll kind of learn that, you'll learn that as we go. Right now I don't want to get too deep into that, because I want to get into our lesson and start you guys on this, because you're going to start to see it's going to be affected by curves and adding more keyframes and stuff like that. So with that said, let me go ahead here and delete that. Great job, everyone, on first questions for this week, especially because we didn't have a project going on. So that was awesome. You guys did great. I am going to go here and I'm going to duplicate this folder, kind of like we did before. I'm going to copy it, and then I'm going to paste a new one, and then I'm going to rename this for today's class. So it's going to be 01 001, and then I'm going to underscore bouncing ball, right? And so you guys can go ahead and do this. And now you have this project. Actually, let me do it this way. Let me delete that project. Remove that to the trash. I'm going to copy it from here, so I don't have a double folder in there. We're going to do this first, and then I'm going to get into the lesson, because when I start downloading stuff, I will have a place to do that. And then when I click into it, I've got all my folders ready. All right. Let me open up your module for this week. And we're going to first get into, we're going to look over this module. And I'm just going to kind of go through it a little at a time. And let me see here. I want to make sure that you guys are, yep, perfect. There we go. We're just going to kind of walk through this. I'm going to go through the principles of animation here with you guys. I think that the last, like, this has been kind of skipped over. Last couple classes I've taught, we don't really get too deep into this, and I want to go over this right now because I want you guys to really see and understand these in a different way. And so because the 12 principles of animation are really the foundation that we do all of our work off of. And I think it's really important for you guys to have this stuff in the back of your mind for when you go to animate. And so I have both here an image and a couple of videos. These are very short. They're less than 5 minutes long. But these visually will show you guys what the principles of animation look like in motion. So they not only explain what the principles of animation are, which we're going to go through as well, but they also do a visual alongside of it, so you can kind of see and understand and process, because a majority of us in animation, we're visual learners, what they are and how to apply them to your animation. And so let's go through this. I do want to mention to you guys this note here is saying that you don't want to click on the videos like this to play them in here. You want to just click on the link and it'll take you directly to it. So that way you have more of like space and room to work around. Sometimes my brain works faster than my mouth and I mix up words, so I apologize about that. But yeah, if you guys see links like this to videos, definitely go watch them, right? So this right here, Introduction to After Effects Layout, these are the last 2 classes that I taught here. So if you guys already went through these classes, you don't have to watch them. But if you did not watch them, I definitely recommend you need to watch them. So watch those too. But let's kind of go through these visual representations of what the 12 principles of animation are. But they're the foundation principles of animation, like I said. You guys should be looking at these often when you're working until you can get these down into your mind on what they are and until it becomes kind of second nature, right? You're going to be like, oh, I need to add more anticipation to this, or let's add some, like it's too straight, we need to add arcs, or there's something about the scene that doesn't look right, we need to adjust the staging. So let's kind of go through those one at a time and talk about them. But I want you guys to know that these were not created, I mean, it wasn't long ago that these were thought up, that the idea of these principles came to fruition in life. It was Ollie Johnston and Frank Thomas, who were Disney animators. They were part of the, I think the 5 Old Men or the 8 Old Men, the original Disney animators who did all of the movies that we remember. They wrote this book called The Illusion of Life, Disney animation, back in 1981, I think. And this book details these principles that they talk about, which helps to make an animation look grounded in reality. And it's kind of like I was talking about last week, learning from masters of art. Once you know the foundations and the rules, that's when you can start to break them. Same here, right? So learn the rules first, and then you can start breaking and bending the rules later. And so I want you guys to kind of definitely write these down. Definitely have this video on hand or just these on hand anywhere. I did add the link. Here is a link to the book that I was talking about where Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston wrote. This one it's kind of harder to find. It is more expensive. Last time I saw it was like $50-$60. So if you guys don't get this one, it's not that big of a deal. I'm not saying you have to go out and buy any of the books that I talk about in this class, but these ones are, this one's great to kind of read about what the founding fathers or the like forefathers of animation really thought about and what their processes were. And so if you go to just the Disney bookstore, you can like select where you want to find it. But I don't know if they stopped print of this, but it's definitely harder to find because I went trying to look at on Amazon and I couldn't find it. So but it's good to look at and maybe find some more information about if you can. Now, the principles that we have here, I'm going to kind of zoom in here so that you guys can see. We'll talk about them one by one, kind of left to right here, and then we'll move down. They're all very important, and they all bleed into each other, right? When we're usually working with one, we unintentionally create the other ones. Oh, nice. Keith says you find those at work all the time. Do you work at a bookstore then? That's fantastic. Let us know what bookstore if you do. If you work at a bookstore, and then where other students could get those. Because that's awesome. Yeah, I don't know. I looked at Barnes & Noble, and Barnes & Noble didn't even have it on their website. So I was just kind of shocked by that. But yeah, put that in the chat. I'll see it at some point here in a second, and then I will let everyone know. Oh, yeah, thrift books. Oh, genius idea. Actually, that's a great place. Obviously, you guys can go there. And also, like, I guess I'm going to promote his store more because he is here, because Keith is here in the chat. So go check out Thrift Books. A decent price if they don't have it checked out. Oh, yeah. There you go. You get a better price than if you bought it new. And then also, I guess Zia Records and stuff like that, because they sell used books, but I don't know if I've ever seen it there. But I would recommend then going to Keith's, the Thrift Books, and finding it there and picking up a copy if you guys can, because it's definitely worth a great read, and you get to read about all the films and cartoons and stuff you guys used to watch, right? Which is awesome. So thank you for that, Keith. Back to this with the principles of animation. The first one that we have and the one that we're really going to work on in this project is squash and stretch. Now, squash and stretch gives weight and volume to objects, right? Notice that this ball is changing and deforming as it goes along the line, but when you play this back, it gives life to the object. And you can use squash and stretch in many different objects. It doesn't have to be something that's living. It can be inanimate objects as well that you are animating to make it look like it has characteristics, right? The more squash and stretch that you give something, the more cartoonish it looks. And so there's different, like, for instance, we'll talk about this later as well, but with a ball, right? If you are bouncing a basketball, which is pumped up fairly tight and it doesn't really give a lot, like you're squeezing it, right? It's not going to have as much squash and stretch as if you were to bounce like a dodgeball, right? A dodgeball is squishy. I mean, obviously, we get hit by them, so it can't be super hard. But like if you were to bounce a dodgeball, it's obviously going to squash and stretch more, and have a little bit more flexibility than you would with like a basketball, right? And so squashing and stretching is something that we use all the time in animation. Timing and motion. This is a little bit more, you'll understand it a little bit more as we go, but the more frames that you have closer together, the more keyframes or frames that are closer together to each other, the slower action that you have. The further apart they are, the faster the action, right? And so you guys are going to see that when we're working here next. But when you draw your images close together, for instance, right here, this close together action, that is going to be a slower action. This part right here where the images are drawn further apart, that's going to be a faster action, right? So the ball is going to move faster in this spot and then slow down up at the top of the bounce. And so that's what timing is about. Anticipation. Oh, let me zoom back in there. There we go. Anticipation here prepares the viewer for an action, and it kind of heightens suspense, right? So I want you guys to think about like swinging a hammer, right? You don't just pound the hammer right away. You bring the hammer back and then you swing the hammer down. In fact, if you really wanted it to look super exaggerated, you would bring it over your shoulders like this little guy is demonstrating right here. You bring it over your shoulders and you're going to slam that down, right? That is anticipation, the action that you have going back and then moving forward. Hitting a baseball, right? You don't just hit the ball right off the bat. You put your arm back, you kind of rock the bat back and forth, you step back, you move your body into it. All of that kind of stuff is anticipation. Staging here. It's going to set the primary mood or idea of a scene that you are working on, right? So, kind of like the little thing right here, we're obviously shining a light on the ball. This is just kind of like whatever the space around your main subject is. So if you wanted it to be, if you're doing an animation of something in a scary, like let's say you're creating an animation for like a little vampire, right? And the vampire You obviously wouldn't want him out in a sunny area unless it's comical, right? But if you want it to be spooky and eerie and setting the mood, you kind of want things in the background to look dilapidated and dark and old and worn and torn. So those are the kind of things that you want to think about. How does your environment lend itself to the story at hand, right? Follow through and overlap is going to sound kind of similar to anticipation, but it is not. That's when parts of a subject or an object that continue to move, that are like moving after the main action. So that would be like this guy here. He is, hold on, let me see. I feel like that definition is not the one that I wanted to put there. Okay, yeah, no, that is incorrect. That definition I just gave you, I wrote in the wrong spot for me. So I want you guys to kind of knock that one out of your head. That's a one later on. Let me just erase that from your brains. Erasing it right now from my notes. Okay. The definition of follow through and overlap is going to be a motion that supports or exaggerates your primary action. So here we're seeing him lifting the box, right? The primary action is going to be him standing and like lifting, but the follow through and overlap is going to be his arms moving with the box, right? He's like, that's also a secondary motion. So not only do you have to animate this guy standing up, but then you have to animate his arms lifting the box. That is your follow through. That's your overlap, right? The other one, we'll get to it here in a minute. Straight ahead and pose to pose action. There are two different ways of animating whatever you're going to animate, right? A straight ahead is when you are drawing from one frame to the next in order. So that's if I were drawing a triangle and then another triangle next to it. And then this triangle starts to get skinnier. And then it's getting even skinnier. And like, you know, further and further. But you're going from frame 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 versus pose to pose, where you draw your main actions and then you fill the frames in between. Pose to pose is really good for very dramatic scenes where you have like a crazy kind of action going on. So let me just kind of demonstrate what the pose to pose would be. Like if I were going to draw a circle here, and then later on, halfway through the animation, I wanted that circle to turn into a triangle. And then later on, I wanted it to turn into a square, right? So at the beginning of the animation, it's going to be a circle. Midway through, it's going to be a triangle. And at the end, it's going to be a square. And then what I would do is I would kind of draw the frames in between to kind of get to more of what these start to look like, right? So then I would go in here and then just to kind of get the gist. Obviously, I'm drawing with a mouse right now and it looks like dog doo-doo. So, so like, I mean, I don't want you guys to like think that's it, but that's kind of what the difference is. So straight ahead is drawing from one frame to the next frame in order. Pose to pose is kind of drawing your main actions. So you do the beginning, the middle, the end, and then you draw in between those. Are these kind of making sense for you guys in the chat? Oh. Let me zoom back in here. Slow in and out. This one, you guys are definitely going to work with all the time. You're going to end up doing it and not even think about it at a certain point. But slow in and out. The subject needs time, or your object needs time to slow down or to speed up. The best way I can explain this is thinking about a car at a stoplight, right? When you're going into the stoplight, let's say you're driving and you have a red light and you're coming up to it. You have to slow down. You have to slow into that stop, right? And then you're at the stoplight for a little while, it turns green. Now you're going to slow out of the stop. You're going to accelerate out of that stop into the go position. So you're slowly moving out of that stopping position into the slow or into your full speed. And so that's kind of the best way to think about what slow in and out is like giving the object time to slow down and to giving that object time to speed up, because you're not just going to be at a stoplight to 60 miles per hour in like a split second. It's just not going to happen. Your car gradually speeds up to that speed, unless you're Flash Gordon, which would be different. Would pose to pose also be called in-betweening? So the in-betweens are what you draw in between your main poses. So that's exactly what that is, Lena. So you have your beginning, middle, terrible triangle, and everything in between are called in-betweens or tweening. You'll hear it both ways. Good question there. Okay, arcs. Let's talk a little bit about arcs. Arcs increase the realism of like a subject's action. So this is something you want to think about when you're thinking about humans and animals. Humans and animals, we all move in arcs. We do not move in straight lines. When you go to, like when I'm coming up to scratch my face, I'm just thinking about it now because I'm doing it. My arm moves in like an arcing motion up to my face. I don't just go like straight up to my face like that. I arc my hand to my face. If you're going to wave to someone, like you bring your arm up and like if you could imagine at the tip of my fingers, a line being drawn as I bring my hand up, you're going to see it moving in an arc versus just like straight up in the air. It just doesn't do that. And so arcs are important when you want to sell the realism of something. As far as like birds go, we were animating that bird across the screen. Remember how I said this isn't how a bird really flies, but if we're just moving it for the example, a bird flies in like a swooping motion, right? They swoop in and up and down and in and out, and they, so at some point they go straight, but most of the time it's just like this nice swooping motion, even when they move their wings. So you guys are kind of starting to think about and visually see how subjects start to move. And I want you guys to kind of just start noticing this when you're out in public, just sitting down, watching people, watching animals. You're going to notice these things. Exaggeration. Is exactly what it's talking about, like exaggerating physical features or elements of objects to exaggerate the form. And that's more of like, a cartoonish style. So if you're going for something realistic, you're not going to want to exaggerate things, but you can exaggerate motion, right? Like instead of someone just doing a sneeze, that's a great one, because I can think of a lot of animations I've seen where sneezes have them going, "Aah!" And it's like a really long like setup, and then they achoo. That's exaggeration. It kind of falls into follow through and overlap, and actually secondary animation too. So a lot of these are like intertwined and linked with each other, and they're naturally going to overlap each other when you are animating. Speaking of secondary action, that is the one that I had wrong at first. Secondary action is when parts of a subject or object continue to move after the main action. So I want you guys to think of that like hair, clothing, things that are attached to you, like a cat's tail, right? Things that are attached to you that would just kind of move naturally without moving on their own. A cat's tail is kind of actually not a great example because you can make a cat tail twitch on its own, but hair is a great example. So like If someone turns their head really fast and their hair wafts afterwards, that's a secondary action. Clothing, as like if you're running in the wind, your clothing's like flapping in the wind, or cape or something, that's a secondary action. They seem very similar between overlap and follow through, but you will see more what the follow through is. So, like the best example I can think here for the follow through, if we're going back, is like when you swing a hammer down and it hits the nail and it kind of bounces up for a second. That's a follow through action. That's like the secondary, that's like the motion that happens afterwards. It's following through on that action. And then the secondary action would be like the hair moving in the wind, cape moving in the wind. Yeah. Solid drawings are just kind of what they sound. They add weight, they add volume and illusion of dimension. And then appeal is just like looking good and selling the animated objects or characters to like captivate your audience, right? You want it to grab your audience's attention and you want your audience to want to see what they're watching. If it's uncomfortable, I'm sure you guys have heard of Uncanny Valley, right? That's where your where things are they almost look accurate, but they're not. That kind of stuff can throw people off and make people feel uneasy. And so, like, looking over your whole thing and being like, does this whole animation have appeal? Does it look good? Is this something that, I think looks great? Because what we do is art. It's design and art. And so that is the base of this profession, and you want to make sure that your work is appealing to others. And so those are the 12 principles of animation. And you're going to see these throughout all of our projects that we work on in class. But definitely things that you guys should start, like, just bank this stuff in the back of your head, right? And so I wanted to spend some time on this so that you guys hear it from the horse's mouth, essentially, what these are, and giving you examples. I still recommend watching these videos since they're so short, and you'll see these in action as well. And so moving on from there, the introduction to After Effects, already talked about that. But this is essentially what we're going to be creating this week. And so it seems rather boring, right? Just 3 bouncing balls. But within this, you are going to be using some of these principles of animation, including squash and stretch. We're not really following arcs here, right? Because of the perspective of the ball that we're looking at is just bouncing straight up and down. But we're going to be creating 3 different balls, a 2D ball in Adobe Animate using frame by frame. In fact, I might do something a little different where we're animating a ball bouncing along an arcing path. That might be good for you guys to do. And then we're also going to be creating a 2D ball in After Effects, which is this one right here. And then we're also going to be creating one inside of a 3D ball inside of Cinema 4D. Now, the After Effects ball and the Cinema 4D ball will have templates for you guys to work with. I believe they are updated templates, but I will double check that. And you guys can download these templates and save them to your project files and work off of these templates, but you want to save them with your name to it, right? So we're going to design all of these, and then we are going to composite them together. So that's kind of what this diagram is. It's a diagram of like the workflow for this project. And so here we are creating the 2D ball in After Effects. We're creating a frame by frame ball inside of Adobe Animate. And from there, we are going to make a PNG sequence. And then we are creating a 3D ball inside of Cinema 4D, which we will also create a PNG sequence. And then we will take these PNG sequences from these 2 balls, plus your After Effects ball, and we're going to composite them into one single scene. inside of After Effects. We're going to add some titles to it, and then we're going to export it out using Media Encoder, and then our deliverable is our final, which will be a bouncing ball MP4, and it will contain all three of these bouncy balls from different programs. So you guys are going to see how to work in different programs and composite them all together. So not only are you learning how to do some animation this week, but you're also learning how to do exporting and compositing. And I'm going to walk you through the process of creating these using these tutorials. Now, if you guys, these are the, right here is a template, and here is a template for you to download. This one's the Cinema 4D. The second one here is After Effects. There is no template for the Adobe Animate one, and that is because we are going to be doing everything from scratch here. I'm going to show you guys how to set up your project file and everything. And then just know that when you download these are zipped files, and you have to unzip them in order to work into it. You can't just double click it and go into it. You have to right click, extract all, save that somewhere, and then you can work in those files or pull those After Effects files out to work in it somewhere else. Yeah, so compositing is exactly, Lena asked to define compositing, and compositing is exactly what we were doing last week. It was taking different assets, like maybe different layers, like different shape layers and images and videos and audio and all that kind of stuff, and putting it together, compositing it together into one scene, right? And so that's compositing. And that's what we're going to be doing up here. Let me move my key back. Where are you? I have lost you. Okay. Ooh, there we go. Let me exit out of that. So we're creating them, we're compositing them all together, we're putting all of those videos into one scene, and then we're going to add titles to it, and then we're going to export it out. Does that make sense to you now, Lena? So compositing is essentially just gathering everything all together in one scene. Yeah, just let me know, Lena, if that makes sense now, or if you need me to kind of explain it a little further. But we're gonna start today. Let's start today with the After Effects one, since you guys learned After Effects last week, and then on Thursday we're gonna talk about Cinema 4D. If we get to this, we might get to Cinema 4D today. But let's start with After Effects one. We're going to do the 2D ball there. And then we're going to move to the Cinema 4D one. And then to Adobe Animate. This one, if I change this, you guys might not want to work ahead, right? Because I might change this one, the Adobe Animate one. The hand-drawn frame by frame. I might change this project up a little bit. But if you guys turn these in the way it shows, if you guys want to work ahead, you can. But I suggest, staying and watching these classes, because I make updates to things as we go. And so we can download this folder. I'll give you two options. You can use the template, or we can make one from scratch. But I'll show you how to use the template right now. Let's download this folder. I'm going to open it up. I'm going to hide the school thing. I'm going to drag that onto my desktop there so I can close this. I'm going to drag it into my GCC folder. A lot of dragging things around. And I'm going to just bring that in here and into my After Effects folder, right? And then I'm going to, this is how you extract folders if you guys are unaware. You right click on it, extract all. And then you will have, this pops up on my main screen. It's annoying, but you'll select the destination. It always defaults to next to wherever the zipped one is, and I'll hit extract. That's perfectly fine. I'm going to delete the zipped file. And you can tell it's a zip file because it has a little zipper on the file. I'm just going to delete that so I no longer have it there to bother me. Whenever you, by the way, I'm just letting you guys know, whenever you zip a file up, if you are zipping something up for someone else, it like automatically makes like a parent file and then a sub-parent one the same name. It's really annoying. But you'll just double click into there and then you'll see this template. Yeah, we'll save the changes to that. And so you're going to see that it's going to open you up on the graph editor. Let's go ahead and close that out real quick. We're going to go back to the dope sheet view, right? And you're going to notice that there's a solid here. You have a background, and we also have a ball. And this ball is just a PNG. It's just an image. You can either use this PNG or you can use your shape. You can use your shape tool up here to create your own circle and work with the ball that way. If you don't want it to look like this striped ball here, that's fine. Either way, I'm not going to be upset. We'll work with the PNG asset that we have here so that people know how to work with it, but it's going to be the same process for a for your regular ball, right? The only thing here, no, don't want to click that. If your ball is showing up kind of pixelated and fuzzy, like you can see this, it looks not very sharp. There's a reason for that. And that is because of my resolution that I have over here. This resolution is just to work in. It doesn't mean that it will export out like that. It just means that I want to drop the resolution so that while I'm working, it runs smoother on the computer when I'm playing it back live. This program is very intense on your GPU, and so the more stuff that you start adding in here, when you're playing it back live, it's going to get slower and slower and slower, and it's going to take a really long time. And so what you can do is, if that's happening, you can go over here and you can drop down your resolution to a half, third, or quarter, and it will help it run smoother, right? But for this, I'm going to bring it back into full resolution because it's not going to be that heavy and intensive on the computer just to create a bouncing ball, all right? And so now you notice that it's nice and clear and crisp looking. I am going to shut my webcam off for a moment so that you guys can see the whole. When I'm working in these programs, I shut my webcam off so you guys can see the whole entire program. All right, let me get to my notes for After Effects 1. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and start here. Let's set our scene, right? Like we had inside of, or like our 12 principles of animation, right? Staging is important. And so I want to have some kind of floor to work on with this ball. The black background there is not an actual background there. If I were to click this little button here that toggles on and off your transparency grid, it's going to show me that there's nothing behind here. And so let's go ahead and we're going to add the background to this once we composite everything together, but let's just add a floor in for this ball to like bounce off of, right? And so we can do this one of two ways. You can either come up here and select the shape tool. If you do this, make sure you click off of the layer down here, and then we are going to draw a shape. And you can create your floor this way, or what you can do is you can right click down here in the timeline, and you can go to New, Solid, and you can pick a solid color, any color you want. Let's say, let's kind of go like, I don't really do orange in this class, or reds. Let's stick with kind of an orange, right? We're coming up on spooky season, my favorite time of the year. I'll select orange. I'm going to create a nice, like, burnt orange solid. And remember, layer order matters. So I'm going to grab this layer and I'm going to drag it underneath the ball. And you notice that we still have this shape layer on here. I'm going to delete that because I'm going to show you guys how to do it this way. And I want to add a mask to this so that it's not the entire background, right? I just wanted a small section of the floor here. And so I'm going to go up to, I'm actually going to stay on this rectangle tool here. And let me explain masking to you guys. So it's like cutting a shape out of it's like cutting a window into a shape, right? So that you're only seeing that background or that shape through that little window. And so if I were to select this tool up here, the marquee tool, and make sure that I'm selected on this layer right here. And then the next thing I want to look at is right up here. You're not able to click it right now, but it is selected on this option, which means that it's on the mask mode. The tool here is not in your shape mode, it's in the masking mode. The little star next to it, that's the shape mode. If I were to click off of this layer down here, it's going to turn into the shape mode. You all of a sudden see that the little star is highlighted. We're not trying to draw another shape. We want to make a mask, so we want to make sure that we select that layer and that the mask mode is selected there. And I am going to, as soon as I start to click and drag, you're going to see what's going to happen. It is going to kind of cut around the mask. It's going to cut out the shape of the mask that I'm making. And so the rest of the layer is still there. If I were to click on here, right, and I were to unfurl this further down in the mask, and let's say I wanted to invert this mask so that it's opposite, so that all of this is orange and then this is all transparent right here, I would just hit inverted and it inverts that mask for me. So kind of like you guys are seeing what the mask really is, right? It's a shape on top of a shape layer that only allows you to see whatever is inside of that shape, that mask shape, or on the outside of that mask shape. Here's the inside of that mask shape that I just made, or the outside of it. Now I can always delete this off of here if I select that mask, and we're back to our original thing. We can also do this with the pen tool. So up at the top here on your toolbar, these are your two shape drawing tools, right? You can do something very mathematical and like edged perfectly, or you can do more organic shapes here with the pen tool. And so if I select the pen tool, it's still in the masking mode because I'm still selected on this layer. And now I can make a mask that is unique to whatever I want it to be. And it's not going to show up until I connect the lines, the path together. But now all of a sudden I have this like very organic shaped mask drawn. And then if I want to invert it, I can do the same thing. So that's kind of that is how you create a mask inside of After Effects. We'll be doing this a lot more later in class as well. But this is how we're going to be creating the floor for this bouncing ball. Now you can also do that on top of the shape layers. So that shape layer that I drew earlier for you guys, like the floor right here, I can still click on this layer that I made, but now you notice that the two options are there, and that is because I can either add to this shape layer with more shapes if I want to, right? These are more shapes. Or I can come up here and select the mask option and then start masking out or masking in, adding more masks, right, to that layer. So this one's a little bit more when you're working with a base layer that is a shape layer, and then you start masking on top of that layer, you have a little bit more options to work with versus just using like a solid background. But for this example, I'm just going to use the solid background, and I am going to select this shape and make sure it's automatically into the masking mode. And I am going to draw a mask here. And I actually want to add I want to add to this mask because I don't want it to be necessarily a square. I kind of want it to be a triangle. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my pen tool, or actually I'm going to hit V as in Victor on my keyboard to grab my selection tool. And I am going to I'm going to use my mouse scrolling wheel. When you scroll with your mouse wheel, you can zoom in and out of your composition, which is nice. And down at the bottom, you have these little tiny areas here. And these are vertices or vertexes. And these are editable when you're working with a path. And so I am going to, with my selection tool used, I'm going to click and drag over this one here, and I'm going to bring that in. And I'm going to hold down shift while I'm doing that, so it stays, when you hold down shift, it kind of locks one position so that you can't move out of that. So I was able to only move horizontally and not vertically. And then I'm going to click and drag over this bottom right vertex, and I'm going to hold down shift, and I'm going to drag that to right here as well. So that we've kind of got this upside down pyramid looking thing, right? And then I'm going to, so paths are editable. I just kind of want you guys to note that in the back of your mind. We're going to work with editing paths a lot later, a lot more in this class as well. But this is the first introduction that you get to kind of editing a path on here. Now, again, this is just a mask, so I didn't do anything to the original layer other than cutting the shape out of it, essentially. Is this kind of making sense to all of you right now? Let me know. So we want the mask like a regular mask. And this looks okay right now, but we want it to be nice and soft around these edges. I'm not such a big fan of this hard edge right here, and so I just kind of want it to be a little bit softer around this area. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into that mask here, and there's an option, there's multiple options down here under your mask, right? You can edit your mask path, which I just did, by taking those corners and moving them inwards. You can feather your mask, which makes it soft and feathered around the edges. So it makes it kind of move from fully opaque and hard to a much more gradated look and transparent look, right? You can change the opacity of it. So if you don't want it 100% there, you can update the opacity. And the expansion, it moves it beyond what your layer path is. So if I were to click on these to kind of show you what that looks like, the feathering, if I increase that, notice how it makes it all soft and smooth around the edges. If I change the opacity and drop the opacity down, it's changing the transparency of that layer. And then if I change the expansion, it's expanding in and out of that layer, right? And so I just want to, all I want to do is change the feathering a little bit. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to manually, I'm going to click there. It's locked, so it's going to feather it in both the X and the Y value, right? And I'm going to do that to 15 pixels. In fact, let's unlock this because I don't want it to be feathered here up at the top part of the layer. So we're going to unlink those properties, and we're just going to feather your X value right here. So we'll probably put 25. Looks pretty nice. And then that way you have like a nice soft edge around here and a hard edge to where the floor is. I'm going to increase this a little bit because I want a little bit more feathered there. Maybe even 125. When you're typing in values into your properties down here, and you're curious what the property does, putting in a large value, like from a small value to a large value, will give you an idea of what is happening on that property, right? So with mask expansion, if I'm like, oh, what does this do? I'm going to type in like 50 because that's such it's a much larger number, obviously, than 0. And then I'm like, oh, it's expanding the bounds of where my mask is, right? It's adding pixels to the outside. So if I'm like, oh, this was a little too small for what I wanted it, a little bigger, you can either expand your mask right there, or there's multiple ways of doing things, right? You can scale this layer. You can hit S on your keyboard for scale, and you can scale the layer. So just different ways of doing different things in here. I like the size of this, and I'm just going to kind of bring this down a little bit here. Now, I mentioned anchor points last week in class. I want this anchor point of the floor to just kind of be down here with the floor itself and not up above. And that's just because for kind of cleanup of my composition. And so I'm going to hit Y as in yo-yo on my keyboard, and that's going to bring me up to my pan behind or my the pan behind tool or anchor point tool. And I'm just going to grab this anchor point right here in the center. The anchor point is always going to be this little circle with it looks like a crosshair, right? Like in gaming. And I'm going to grab that, and I'm just going to hold shift and kind of bring that towards the center of my object here. And so then when I go ahead and drag this, when I hit V on my keyboard to switch to the selection tool, and I drag this around, it'll just move from there. Now to the fun part, animating the ball. I'm just going to furl that line up, and I'm going to click on my ball right here. And speaking of anchor points, the anchor point is in the center of the ball right now. Now, if we're wanting to add things onto this ball, because we're going to be working with not only the position property, but we're going to be also working with the scale property in this animation, right? Because we want to add one of our principles of animation, which was squash and stretch. We're wanting to add squash and stretch here to our animation. And in order to do that, we have to animate the scale of the object. But when I start animating the scale of the object, it's moving from the center, and that's not where I want the scale to kind of happen. I want the scale to be happening down at the bottom of the ball. And so if I put my value back to 100, oh, see what I did, guys? You'll get to this part too. I accidentally went into that layer. I'm just going to go up here and close that out, and it takes me back to my composition. But I need to change this anchor point so it's at the bottom of the ball, because that's where I want the animation to be driven from, right? And so I'm going to hit Y on my keyboard again, and I'm just going to hold down shift and click and drag that anchor point to the bottom of the ball. All right, here. The next thing I want to do is, because I kind of have my scene all set here, is I want to save this, because I don't want all this work that I just did to go away, right? And so I'm going to go up here to File, and I'm going to save my project. I'm going to go to Save As, because I don't want to save it to the template. I want to save this project under my own name. And so I'm going to, it automatically puts me into this template folder where the original one was. I'm going to move my way out of that. And the way you can do that is by going up here in this navigation bar. You can just start clicking back in these little folder options there. Or you can notice that you can see kind of the folder path here on the side. So I can either click up here to the bouncing ball folder, or I can just click right over here to the bouncing ball folder. And I'm going to go into After Effects, and I'm going to save my project right here next to this template. And so I am just going to go down here, and I'm going to put my name at the beginning of this project, Makara, my last name. And I'm going to hit underscore AE bouncing ball, and then I'm just going to remove template 2023. Make sure that you have the .aep. I mean, you can also just remove this and it will save it automatically as an After Effects file. So you can remove the extension if you want, but this is what I'm going to save it as, and I'm going to save it just kind of next to this template folder. Hitting save there. And so now, as I am working, I can hit Control or Command S on my keyboard, and it's going to save the file as I go, so I don't lose any, so I'm not losing any work, right? All right. Sorry, guys, I wanted to take a drink there. And so we're going to start with the base of this animation, of like what is driving this animation. And that, in fact, let me ask you guys in the chat, if you guys are still there, which property will I use to move the ball? Because we're going to have this ball bouncing up and down, like this GIF here, right? We're going to have the ball bouncing up and down. And so which property, remember there's 4 transform properties, or I'm sorry, there's 5, but which transform property am I going to be using to move the ball from up to down? Not keyframes. We're going to be adding keyframes. This is a transform property that we're going to be using. So out of, I'm going to unfurl this layer. Out of anchor point, position, scale, rotation, and opacity, which one of these are we going to be using in order to move the ball up or down? Here, I'll give you guys a little hint here. Watch which value starts to change. Which values on here start to change when I start moving this ball up or down. Like I'm just manually moving it up or down to see here. Correct. Yeah, Lena said it. Position property. Perfect. And so, we're only going to be using one position here. Sorry, I'm just getting a little distracted for a second. We're only going to be using one of our coordinates on our position property. And so what I want to do here is I want to right click and I'm going to separate the dimensions, because you know what? I don't need to work on my X value because this ball isn't going to go from left to right. It's only going to go from top to bottom. And so when I separate these dimensions, it makes it just easier to work and to focus on one thing versus having both of them. Now, when you're animating, you want to separate your dimensions before you start to keyframe. Right? Before you start to animate, you want to do this first. Because once you start putting keyframes on your timeline here, you can't go back and separate these dimensions. You have to start over. So just remember to do this before you do anything else. And then I'm going to just hit my layer, and I'm going to hit P for position on my keyboard. So it just kind of, it just focuses on the position aspect of it. And I am going to move my ball to where I want it to start from. So I want it to start bouncing from the top here. The top of the bounce, it's going to go down and up and down and up. And so I'm going to bring that up. I like round values, so I'm going to type in here 350 even. So it brings it up to 350 on my Y value. And I am going to make sure that my playhead is at the beginning of my timeline here. And I am going to keyframe this position. I'm going to record this position by pressing this little stopwatch here. And then I'm going to select my layer, and I'm just going to hit U for umbrella on that layer so that it only brings up that Y position for me to look at. Now, one thing I didn't do before we started animating here, which you guys should always do, is check my composition settings. If you guys are just looking at the timeline and looking at the numbers here on the timeline or looking at the time code here, can you guys tell how many frames per second that we're working in? I don't know if Lena, you're the only one with me, but possibly. I know it's a long class, so people tend to drop off towards the end. Here, let me put some music on for you guys too, so you guys can. There we go. So we are working in 24 frames a second. We can tell that by coming up to. That's okay, Lena. We're learning right now, so I don't want you to feel like that's a problem. So if I come up here to where it says 1, right? That's 1 second. And if I just move my playhead 1 frame over, and I look at my time code over here, it says 23, and it always counts up to the next second on the 24th frame, whatever frames per second that you're working in, right? And halfway in between is 12. So that's kind of how you can initially tell where, oh, I see that there's 24 frames in 1 second, so we're working in 24 FPS. Also, if you look at the time code here, you can see that 24 FPS it tells you right there. We can also check again by hitting Control and K or Command and K when we're in our timeline here at the bottom. And you can see here that it says 24 frames a second. We're working in our resolution, which is 1920 by 1080. And we have 2 seconds total on our timeline here. So I'm going to hit OK. And we've keyframed our initial position up here at the top. And the next thing we want this ball to do is we want it to hit down here at the bottom. And so we're going to go halfway in between. We're going to go halfway in between 1 second, which is 12 frames, right? In between the 24 frames is 12. And we're going to just take this value and we're going to bring it down until the bottom of the ball is touching the top of the floor. And I'll probably just type in 880 here. Probably won't be able to see much of a difference. But that's just, that's just me. You don't have to do that. In fact, I might just make it overlap just because. So 885. And it's touching the floor. It's making contact right there. And now we want this ball to, so we've got the ball. Oh, let me see here. I accidentally had changed this keyframe. This was back at 350. I'm going to type that back up there. So one thing you don't want to happen is you don't want both of your, let me lock this layer so I don't move it. You don't want both of your keyframes to be highlighted in blue when you start moving things, because it will change all of your keyframes. And we definitely don't want that. So make sure that they aren't highlighted when you're changing that. But the first keyframe here, this little guy right there, the first keyframe is at 350, it's up at the top here. And then halfway through a second, we're going to drop to the bottom, which is at 12 frames. We're going to hit the floor. And then we're going to bring this back to 1 second at 24 frames. And we're actually going to highlight this last frame, or the first frame here. And we're going to hit Control C, Control V. And that just copies that property keyframe to wherever your playhead is. So I could even do it again right here if I wanted to. I could select this one and hit Control C, Control V. And so then all of a sudden we have multiple bounces kind of happening, right? And so I'm going to go to the very end here. I want to go at 2 frames. And I want it to go back up. So I want it to bounce back. So it would be this keyframe right here, which is the keyframe position where the ball is up in the air. I'm going to copy and I'm going to paste it over here. But then I'm going to just grab this and move it on over to the 2 second mark, because our playhead only goes to the 23rd frame on here for some reason. And so I just want to make sure that everything's equal distance apart. And now if I play it, we have a bouncing ball. Now, the bouncing ball, I mean, it's effective, right? We can tell it's bouncing, but it doesn't look, there's nothing about this that's selling it as a bouncing ball. I saw Nakara, you said 22. Close. It was 24. Good guess, though. And I know there's a delay on the live stream, so if I don't see that right away, I apologize. But this ball, there's no gravity added to this ball, right? There's no acceleration and deceleration. And I'm going to turn my camera on so you guys can see me real quick. But when a ball is bouncing to the ground, right, you're accelerating that ball down. It's going fast on its way down, and on its way up, that momentum is slowing, and the ball slows down on the peak of the bounce, right? So when it's up at the top, it's the slowest, and then when it's down on the bottom, it's the fastest the bounce should be. And so we're going to be doing something called easing. And what easing does is it's going to allow us to adjust the velocity of these keyframes and the motion that we just did, and to create that momentum on the way down and slowing that momentum on the way up. Yes, there is a way to extend the timeline, Lena. Ooh, tongue twister there. And that is if I hit Control K. I'm sorry, let me click in here. Control K. I can come up here and I can just extend this to, I don't know, 3 seconds there. And so then if I do that, you don't see anything. But if I remember how you can zoom in and out of your timeline right here on your, in your entire comp there, you can zoom in and out. I'm just going to bring that to the smallest form, and I'm going to extend these layers. All right, so that they extend all the way across the timeline now. This layer won't extend because I have locked it, just so that I don't move it. If you don't want to accidentally move a layer, you can lock it over here in the corner. Let me hide my webcam again. But I can select, unlock this layer, and then I will select it, and I will extend that layer, and then I will lock it again. And so that way, if I accidentally click here, it's not going to move that floor for me. The floor is just there. So, but I'm going to shorten my workspace. And how I did that is I just brought the playhead to the 2 seconds, and I hit N as in Nancy on my keyboard. And that's just going to shorten the workspace so that when I play this, it's only going to play to the 2 seconds, and then it's going to go back and forth. So, because if this workspace were extended, if my work area were all the way to the 3 seconds, what you're going to see is the bounce is happening, and then it's going to stop in the air. And we don't want that. We want something called a seamless loop. And a seamless loop is where the beginning and the end match. They're exactly the same. And so it looks seamless when it's playing and repeating over and over again. Because the beginning keyframe here and the end keyframe here are exactly the same. And so I don't want all this extra space here. All this extra time allows for this ball to just stay up here without anything happening. And so I'm just going to shorten the workspace for now, just so I can see it repeat itself. Or what you could do is you could just continue to copy and paste these keyframes. So it's at the top there. We would move 12 frames. We would want the keyframe to be in this spot where the playhead is, that the where the ball is on the ground, which would be this keyframe. What we can do is we can select both of these, because here's the ground keyframe, here's the air keyframe. We're going to hit Control C, Control V, and we just copied those keyframes exactly. It'll keep the spacing and everything, if this kind of makes sense. So now I have a full-on seamless loop where the ball is bouncing. And in order to make sure that's a seamless loop, right, this value here and the first keyframe value and the last keyframe value over here at the 3-second mark have to be exactly the same. They both have to be at 350, right? They have to be at that value that I have there. And so I have the basics of a bouncing ball happening, where I have 1, 2, 3 full bounces happening there, right? 1, 2, 3 full bounces. Let's focus on just one bounce at the moment. No, we can let's focus on all the bounces actually. We'll do this all the same. You know what? I think it would be easier for you guys to copy and paste these keyframes after. So let's just focus on the one bounce. We're going to go to 1 second. I'm going to hit the N on the keyboard just to shorten this playing. And I'm going to delete all these keyframes that I made afterwards. Just going to remove these here, because I want to focus on this first full bounce. I want to get it to look really nice, and then I'll copy it once everything's kind of perfected in here. But this is what's called blocking out the animation, right? Where we have the basics, almost like a pose to pose, and the computer creates the in-between frames for us, right? First pose, the beginning pose, the middle pose, and the end pose, right? And then the computer so graciously creates all of the in-betweens. So because if it were a frame-by-frame animation where we were doing it by hand, all of this space in between we would have to make by ourselves. And you'll see that next class. And so I wanna add that velocity to this bounce. And I do that through something called easing. So I'm going to select all of these keyframes, and I am going to right click on them and go to keyframe assistant here. And down here you're going to see different options. We're going to hit easy ease. And what that's going to do is you're going to see it changes the keyframes from a diamond shape to like an hourglass shape. This is how you tell that you have eased keyframes. Before, these diamond-shaped keyframes are linear. Linear motion does not happen really in nature, in like natural things, right? This is where our principle of animation, slow in and out, comes to play, right? Where we were talking about how a car slows into a stop and then accelerates into going, right? And so we want to kind of emulate that here. And when you have linear keyframes, it's all one solid timing. So if I'm playing this, like the speed of the entire animation is the exact same. There is no slowing, there is no speeding up on the way down, there's no slowing down on the way up. And so what we're going to do, again, we're going to select those keyframes, and we're going to right click, and we're going to go to, actually let's do it this way. Let's grab those keyframes, and we're going to hit the graph header. We're going to go into the graph editor on our timeline. And I want you to make sure that you're in the value graph. So if when you do this, you open your graph and it looks like this is the wrong graph to be in. Let me turn this song down. It's a little distracting for me. Shut it off real quick. This is a speed graph. We don't want to be in this graph. We want to be in the value graph. And so you just right click on this area and you'll go into your value graph. And we are going to select, you're going to notice that there is these little vertexes on your graph right here. And these are your keyframes, right? These little spaces right here are the keyframes that we just put down on our timeline on the dope sheet view. And we're going to select this one right in the middle when the ball is on the ground, right? If we move our playhead over to here, we can see the ball's on the ground. And down here, we're going to select the easy ease. So we're only going to ease the middle keyframe right now. So I'm going to grab that. Or I'm going to press that, and you're going to notice all of a sudden we have a smooth looking curve. So instead of like a very pointy, very linear, very straight looking curve or graph line, we now have a nice smooth looking line on our graph. And this is going to show kind of how the ball is moving. So right now, when the graph moves up like this and kind of slows at the peak, this is showing that the ball is slowing down when the ball is getting to the ground. And we don't want that, right? We want the ball to accelerate when it's hitting the ground. So we need to make this graph look opposite. We want this graph to look like, we want it to speed up before it hits the ground. So we want this graph to kind of look like this, to look opposite of what it is right now, right? We want it to almost look like a W, like half of a W. And so we need to change these lines, which is your curve. We need to change these curves to look more like this, to look more like that upside down kind of half pipe look, right? And so I'm going to select that center keyframe, and holding down, I think Alt on my keyboard, I'm going to grab this. Nope, not that. Is it Control? Yeah. Holding down Control or Command on my keyboard. If I grab, these here are called Bezier handles. These little things right here. And that just allows me to change the shape of my graph when I grab them. They can, if you hold down Command, you can grab one side. But if you grab this by itself without, oh, does it work like that now? It's automatic like that. If you hold down Alt, though, it changes them equally. Oh, let me undo that. Undo that. Okay, so we're going to redo this again. We're going to get back to where we went. I selected the keyframe when the ball is on the ground, and I'm going to ease that keyframe. And now let's change this graph so that it looks like that upside down half pipe. I'm going to grab this little Bezier handle and I'm going to drag it down. I want it to be like very exaggerated looking. And so I'm going to drag it to where the Bezier handle, the little ball on the end of the Bezier handle, is kind of at my 500 mark right here on my graph, right? That's kind of where I want it to almost line up. And then I want to match this one up to that too. So I'm going to grab this side, let me get out of here, of the Bezier handle, and I'm going to drag that down as well to be at about the same spot on the graph. They're not going to exactly touch each other, right? Because the curve, if I zoom in on this curve, like it can only go so far. Of course, I would have the, there we go. Right? It only goes so far before it's already touching each other. But this part of the graph right here, it looks kind of funny because it's still slowing. It's still kind of slowly going. If I play this, it's not going to look quite right. See how it's kind of got this weird like hold happening at the top? We don't want that to happen. We want it to go fast down to the bottom and slowly coming up to the top. And so I'm going to grab this first keyframe here. And there is not a Bezier handle on here because we have to ease this one as well. But we want this to ease out. We want this keyframe here. We want the motion from the ball to ease out of a stop position into that fast position right there, right? We're easing out of this keyframe. So think of like pulling out of the garage. We need it to kind of happen slowly and then going into the fast speed, right? And so this one would be opposite. We would grab this and we want this one to ease in. And we're going to click that. Now all of a sudden you have this nice, sharp, dramatic kind of bounce that's going to happen here because they're both starting at the exact same spot. And the way that the curve is going out of this keyframe in the last keyframe is exactly the same. And so when I play this, you're going to see that it's going to go down, it's going to accelerate down to the ground, and then it's going to decelerate on its way up. And there we have a much more convincing ball bounce than what we had before when the keyframes were linear. Now that's kind of a lot to take in, right? And this graph stuff is very confusing and it takes a while to kind of grasp the concept of. But are you guys kind of seeing how the change of the graph affects the velocity of the balls? And then if I go back to my dope sheet here, you're going to see like there were no we didn't add any keyframes. We just changed the way the keyframes look. So when the arrow is pointing to the left, it's an ease out keyframe. And when the arrow is pointing to the right, it's a ease in keyframe because we're easing into this position. Notice how we hit the ground and now we're easing up to the top. We're slowing down to the top. And then we're slowly building that momentum and hitting the ground really quickly. We're starting off slow. We get that kind of pause at the top and then we speed down and we hit that floor. And then we go back up and we're slowing down up to the top. Right? So here we've got this with that velocity built in, that gravity built into the ball, to the ball bounce, which is way more convincing than what we had before, right? And if you notice this graph, it actually looks like if you were to bounce a ball somewhere, it looks like kind of the upside down arc of what a ball bounce would look like. That makes sense. That could be confusing. If it is, just wipe it from your mind because you don't have to let that stick. But let's take this a little bit further and add some squash and stretch, right? So that we're adding that volume and the believability to this ball. And so the ball most likely is going to stretch on the way down. And then when it hits the ground, it's going to squash outwards, right? It's going to squash the ball. It's not going to stretch it. It's not going to stretch vertically. It's going to squash out horizontally. And then as it goes back up, you're going to see it's going to stretch back up on its way up again. Lena asks, so would you recommend making the keyframes for one bounce first before the graph easing? Yes, correct. You're going to make, so you're going to keyframe your position keyframes. I can kind of go through the process again right here. Let's type it out. Let's type out the process for you guys. So you're going to create the ball or bring the ball in. Onto your timeline, right? You're going to add the floor. And then you're going to add the mask to the floor. Right? And then we're going to block out the animation, which entails I'll bring this in and I'll kind of put a little dash in front. Animating position of ball. And then you're going to just, so that is going to be up in the air, then on the floor, then back up in the air. Remembering to keep the first and last keyframes the same value, right? That's a big important one. If they are not the same value, you're going to notice that there's going to be a hitch in your animation. I'll show you what that looks like here in a second. And then once you have a full bounce, then you can ease the keyframes, right? What we just did by updating the graph is called easing the keyframes. All right, so this is kind of the step that you're going to do. Now, the step-by-step process. Now, if this value is for some reason at all off, right? Like if this is at 300, if I change the value there, you can't see it on the keyframe, but as soon as I go into the graph and I click on this, notice that the here, the line from this keyframe to this keyframe do not match up, right? There's like a space in between here, and that's how you can tell that they're not the same value. And so then watch what happens when I play this. It's not going to be a seamless loop. There's like this jumping look, and this is a big problem that everyone has in the beginning of this class, in specifically on this project, is there's like this kind of glitch or like hitch in the animation that happens. And so if this is going on, you know that your first and last keyframe values are not the same. And so what I'll do is I'll bring my playhead over to this keyframe value again. I'm going to see that it's different. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to type in the same exact keyframe. Or you can just delete this one and copy and paste this one, right? And so make sure that that hitch isn't there before you start the easing process. So you should make sure that the bounce is nice and smooth and there is no hitch up here at the top of the animation. And then go on to the easing. But let's add that squash and stretch in here to add some more like realism to this, right? And so we're going to start we're going to do something called animating backwards. And I know that the most exaggerated part of the squash and stretch is going to happen when the ball hits the floor, right? And so we're going to add another property here, right? Because we're not working with the position anymore. With the squashing and stretching, we work with scale. And so I'm going to hit, hold down shift and hit S for like scale on the keyboard. And we're not going to separate the dimensions here because the biggest thing about squashing and stretching, and I want you guys to remember this always, when anything squashes and stretches, it changes, the form looks like it changes, but it doesn't change the volume or the mass of the object. So what that means is that we're going to unlink these dimensions here, because whatever we add to one dimension or one value, so like whatever we add to the X, we deduct that same amount from the Y, and vice versa. Whatever we deduct from the X value, we add to the Y value. And so let's look at what that looks like. First of all, I want to keyframe both of these right here, and we're at the bottom of the bounce where it's on the floor. And right here is where I want the most like squashing and stretching to happen, right? Because it's going to flare out on the horizontal axis, which is going to not be your Y, but it's going to be your Z. And so I'm going to increase the scale of it, right? Because I want it to flare outwards. So I'm going to add 20% to this. I'm going to type in 120. And notice that it expands out. Well, this is increasing the mass of the ball. And so now I have to, because I increased the X value by 20%, I have to decrease the Y value by 20%. So this value is going to be 80. And now the ball is the same volume, it's the same mass, but it's just expanding outwards, right? And I want this to happen right when the ball hits the floor, but I don't want it to happen before the ball's hitting the floor, right? I want it to stretch out and elongate before that happens. And so I'm going to take my playhead and I'm going to move it over one keyframe. So you can do this by either dragging it with your mouse. Notice that it kind of clicks over on keyframes. I can zoom in here if you guys want to see all the individual keyframes separately on the timeline. I just zoomed into my timeline. And so you can see, remember, it snaps to the frames. It's going to snap here to your frames. It doesn't let you do anything in between these frames, right? The keyboard shortcut to do this is Control and your arrow left or right key, right? So if I hit Control and I just tap my arrow left or right key, it will move my playhead back and forth. And so that's a great way if you're kind of zoomed out on your timeline and you want to be more minuscule, you can just do it that way, right? And so I'm going to move back. We're going to work backwards here, like I said. And I want this to be elongated. So I kind of want it opposite of what this value is. So I'm actually going to I'm going to bring it back to 100, 100. And I'm going to change this Y value to 120. And I'm going to deduct 20% from the X value. So I'm going to do 80. And so now the ball is stretching on the way down and squashing when it hits the ground. But I need it to happen. You can kind of see that, right? So you see that the ball stretching on the way down, it hits the ground, it squashes. And now I needed that exact same stretch to happen on the way up, right? And so I'm going to go from the center, from the base of the squash, right? The main squash. And I'm going to move over one frame. And I'm just going to copy this frame because it's going to be the same settings, right? I want it to be elongated. So I want that X value to be 80% and the Y value to be 120. So I'm just going to grab that keyframe with those values. And I'm going to hit Control C and Control V. And I've copy and pasted them here. So now we have a nice kind of stretching happening on the way down. It squashes and it stretches on the way up. The thing is, we want it to come up to the original value when it's up at the very top of the bounce, right? So we want it to be back at its original form, probably right about here at the third keyframe. And so I'm going to type in the value 100, 100, because I want it to be the normal form, the normal shape. And then I'm going to do exactly the same thing here over on this opposite side. So I'm going to work backwards, right? I'm going to put my playhead on my last keyframe, and then I'm going to move backwards 3 keyframes, and I'm just going to copy and paste that keyframe at the beginning here. And so now when I play it, you have this ball that at the top of the bounce is its normal volume, normal shape. There's no squash and stretch. And then as that ball starts to go down, it stretches on the way down. It hits the ground and squashes, stretches on the way up into its original form. And so now we have a ball with a ton of character, and it's really only a few keyframes. Versus when we do this frame by frame, you're going to see it's going to be a lot more. I'm not going to ease the squash and stretch here right now. I might play around with that and see if it looks good to do that later. But because we're at the end of the class, I'm going to leave you guys off here. And we're going to kind of pick up where we left off here at the beginning of next class. All I'm going to do is I might possibly ease these scale keyframes. And I'll obviously walk you through doing that then. But I want to show you how to recolor this ball. And then we're going to create the exact same bounce inside of Cinema 4D. And then we're going to do one inside of Adobe Animate as well. I know this seems like a lot, but when you guys are doing this, just watch this, step by step. And you're going to see, as you go further into class, you're going to start applying this stuff as we go. If you guys have any more questions, because I want to be mindful of your time, right? If you guys have any more questions regarding this, just throw it in if you're in the chat right now, throw it in here. And then if you guys have questions beyond this, you can always write me inside of Slack, or you can write Belle as well. But we still have more to this project. So, if you guys kind of want to do this half of the project first and then work on the next half after class on Thursday, we can do that as well. Now, Nakara asked in the chat, do you want us to copy the things you do? Yes, in the beginning, I do want you to copy the things that I do. And the reason is, yes, step by step. And the reason is because I want you guys to really kind of learn what keyframing is, how the keyframes work, how to ease these keyframes. And then when we get further along in the class, I'm going to kind of let you guys go off and do more of your own thing. And you'll be creating animations on your own. Now, so yeah, in the beginning, step by step, you're going to want to follow this instruction the same way. Lena said that I said not to work ahead in case of new changes. What day can we start after the Thursday lecture? You can start doing this one right here because I'm not doing any changes to this one. So you guys can start doing the After Effects ball. If you guys want to work ahead, that's okay. I'm not going to deduct points for that, but I might change something on Thursday, which would just teach you how to do it in a different way. And then you can either do it the way I do it on Thursday, or you can do it in the videos that are like the way that they are linked in the class, because I'll link anything else that I change in the module as well. But if you want to work ahead, I'm not going to be upset by that. So today we just did the Adobe After Effects one. If you want to do the frame by frame, you can. This one's taught by Casey Farina, but I will also teach this on Thursday. And I think this is the one that I'm going to change, which is the Adobe Animate frame by frame. But if you turn in work that has it like this, I'm not going to be upset. I'm not going to deduct points from you. And then we also still have to do the Cinema 4D one. This one you can do, but you might want to watch class on Thursday because I'm going to go through the layout, right? That's a big thing too, is the layout of Cinema 4D, because we haven't started working in there yet. But yes, for now, just follow what I do, follow what's done in these videos if you move ahead. And as we go further in the class, you guys will be able to have more creative freedom. But right now I need you guys to just kind of copy it step by step to understand things. But good questions, both of you. And Lena, thank you for mentioning that, because yeah, I changed my mind on that. So you guys can work ahead. Even if there are changes, you guys can, if you turn in whatever's on this assignment, I'm not going to be upset. I'm not going to deduct points either. So, if it were me, I'd probably do the After Effects ball until next class. And then after next class, I would do the rest of the assignment, right? So I'm going to save this because I don't want to lose all my work. And then we'll pick up where we left off in the next class. But that's really all that you need for the After Effects ball. Close this out for you guys. All right, class. Any more questions? And I will answer them via Slack or in Canvas. But in the meantime, I hope you have a good Wednesday night. And I will talk to you guys all later.